In September 634, the Roman relief army's defeat at the hands of the Muslims had reached Damascus. The city was now low on supplies and the people knew that their plan to wait for reinforcements was a failure. They decided to try one last time and break the siege by launching a sally. The Romans gathered a strike force near the gate of Thomas and began their attack by shooting arrows to push the Muslims back. They then launched their foot soldiers through the gate to engage the Muslims. A Muslim commander Shurabil, radiyallahu anhu, was stationed at the gate with 5,000 men to guard it. The fighting lasted for a few hours, and both sides suffered casualties, but the Romans failed to pierce through the Muslim line and retreated back into the city. Shurabil, radiyallahu anhu, requested reinforcements from Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, but he had no men to spare as the other groups besieging the city would become vulnerable if he did so. The Roman garrison inside the city realized that the troops of Shurabil were weakened by their first attack and decided to launch another attempt to break the Muslim line through the gate of Thomas. To prevent the Muslims from coming to Shurabil, radiyallahu anhu's aid, they simultaneously launched small attacks through the other gates. The fighting was fierce, but the Muslims' determination prevailed yet again, and the Romans had to retreat again inside the city. There were no further attempts by the Roman garrison in the next few days. On September 18, 634, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, attempted to scale the wall of the city with Kaka, radiyallahu anhu, and Mazyuar bin Adi, radiyallahu anhu. He had received information from sources inside the city that the most impregnable part of the city wall was left unguarded at night. The three Muslim commanders climbed up the walls with ropes, fastened them on top, and threw the rest down so that more fighters could climb up. Almost 100 Muslim soldiers scaled the wall, and they quickly moved to the eastern gate of Damascus and attacked the sentries there. The alarm was raised, and Roman soldiers rushed to defend the eastern gate, but the Muslims were successful in opening the gate, and the Muslim troops stationed on the other side of the gate rushed in. Now the fighting started inside the city. The other Muslim commanders besieging the city were unaware that Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, had breached the city wall. So their troops did not move against the enemy. The Roman commander of Damascus, Thomas, who was the son-in-law of Emperor Heraclius, understood that the other Muslim commanders did not know yet that the fighting had broken out inside the city. He sent most of his troops to delay Khalid, radiyallahu anhu's, advancement and went to Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu's, camp, located on the other side of the city near the western gate, with a delegation. He offered his surrender to Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, with the condition that no harm would be done to the Romans of the city. As Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, did not know that Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, had breached the city wall, he accepted the surrender. On September 19, both Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, and Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, reached the center of Damascus almost at the same time and realized how the Romans had tricked them. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, did not want to show disrespect to Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu's, promise, so he allowed the Romans to leave the city unharmed. He promised them that for 3 days, the Muslims would harm no one, take no booty, but after 3 days, the pact would be invalid, and the Muslims could attack any Romans. Thomas agreed to the terms and led a convoy out of the city as soon as he could. The Muslims had taken control of the greatest city of Syria, Damascus. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, was not able to forgive Thomas for tricking Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, into accepting the surrender of a city that the Muslims had actually won fair and square. After 3 days had passed, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, followed Thomas and his convoy with 4,000 Muslim cavalry, engaging the Romans at a place called Marjudidabaj during a heavy rainfall. Although the Romans were around 10,000 in number, they could not offer any effective resistance due to the confusion caused by the heavy rainfall and the surprise attack by the Muslims. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, killed Thomas himself in a duel. Upon returning to Damascus, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, found a letter from Medina waiting for him. The letter informed him that Abu Bakr, radiyallahu anhu, had died and Umar, radiyallahu anhu, had become the new caliph. However, the letter also contained a shock for Khalid, radiyallahu anhu. He had been demoted from the post of supreme commander of the Muslim army in Syria. Despite the news hurting him deeply, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, accepted the demotion without protest for the sake of the unity of the Muslim army. It is unclear why Umar, radiyallahu anhu, made such a drastic decision during the ongoing campaign in Syria, but the most accepted opinion is that Umar, radiyallahu anhu, wanted to remind the Muslims that Allah provides victory to the Muslims, and that can happen even without Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, at the command of the Muslim army. The new orders were made public to the whole Muslim army in Damascus, and a week later, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, took the command of the Muslim army in Syria from Khalid, radiyallahu anhu. However, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, had great admiration for Khalid's, radiyallahu anhu, military skills and considered him a valuable member of his war council. With the help of Khalid, radiyallahu anhu's, council and under Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu's, leadership, the campaign of Syria continued unabated. In January of 635, the Muslim army marched out of Damascus upon receiving news of the accumulation of Roman forces at a place called Baisan. The Muslims decided not to march through the marshland and wait for the enemy at Fao. After a week, the Romans appeared to attack the Muslim lines several times, but they could not break through. On the second day, the Roman commander died during the fight. The Romans decided to retreat through the marshland, but the Muslims were not willing to let the enemy go easily. Once the Romans entered the marshland, the Muslims started a counterattack, resulting in almost 10,000 Roman soldiers perishing in the marshland of Fao. In early March of 635, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, and Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, encountered a sizable Roman force at a place southwest of Damascus named Marjuaram. As night fell, the Roman commander decided to send a part of his army towards Damascus while keeping Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, and Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, distracted in Marjuaram. However, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, appeared on the horizon near Damascus with several thousand cavalry and pierced through the Roman lines from the back, resulting in only a tiny portion of the Romans surviving the assault. In the meantime, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, engaged the Romans at Marjuaram and drove them away. Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, and Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, then led the siege of Emesa for 2 months without any progress. The city's residents hoped the Muslims would leave during winter, but the siege persisted. In March 636, the Muslims appeared to be retreating, causing the Emesa inhabitants to sally out in pursuit, only to be met with a counterattack led by Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, resulting in their surrender. From there, the Muslims sent raiding parties to take control of the surrounding area and captured prisoners who revealed Heraclius's plan to drive the Muslims out of Syria. In the late year of 635, while the city of Emesa was under siege, Heraclius, the Roman emperor, initiated a plan to gather soldiers and resources from various parts of the empire for an upcoming campaign against the Muslims. By May of 636, a sizable army of almost 150,000 Roman soldiers had assembled in Antioch to launch an attack on the Muslim forces in Syria. Meanwhile, the Muslim troops were divided into 4 groups: Amr bin al-As, radiyallahu anhu, in Palestine, Shurabil, radiyallahu anhu, in Jordan, Yazid, radiyallahu anhu, at Caesarea, and Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, and Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, at Emesa. This situation made the Muslim forces vulnerable, and each group could be attacked by the newly gathered Roman troops. Heraclius intended to take advantage of this situation. The mission began with 40,000 Roman soldiers landing by sea at Caesarea, and half of the remaining troops marched towards Emesa, while the other half marched towards Damascus. To the surprise of the Romans, they found not a single Muslim soldier in any of these places. Once the Muslims learned about Heraclius's plan, they were worried about their vulnerability to the Roman forces. However, Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, an experienced commander, could easily see Heraclius's strategy in full effect. Based on his suggestion, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, ordered all the other commanders to give up their territories and join him at a location called Jabiya. Consequently, when the Romans arrived, they found that the Muslim troops had already left the aforementioned places. In July of 636, the Roman scouts were already spotted near the concentrated Muslim camp in Jabiya. Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, realized that a battle was imminent, which would determine the fate of the Muslims in Syria. He called for all his commanders to devise a battle plan. Various opinions were given, but ultimately, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, took Khalid, radiyallahu anhu's, advice and moved the Muslim forces to a better strategic location by the side of the Yarmouk River, which they named the Plain of Yarmouk. Here, the Muslims could easily receive reinforcements from Medina, and the large plain allowed them to effectively use their cavalry charge. Soon the Roman army followed the Muslims to this location, and both armies camped in the region. However, for almost a month, there was no major fighting between the two armies. Realizing the massive challenge ahead of them, Abu Ubaidah, radiyallahu anhu, handed the command of the whole Muslim army to the best commander at his disposal, Khalid bin al-Walid, radiyallahu anhu. Khalid, radiyallahu anhu, immediately reorganized the whole army into several infantry and cavalry regiments, and the women and children were put in a camp behind the Muslim lines. During this period, 6,000 Muslims arrived to join, most of whom were from Yemen. This group included 100 veterans of the Battle of Badr and many other prominent companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which boosted the Muslim morale. In total, the Muslim army became 40,000 men strong. The Muslims were now ready for the Battle of Yarmouk.